Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tester. You know what I like to do on my show? I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want you fired up about the book, Addiction, Alcoholism, Tools for Recovery. And the author of the book is Eugene Borwn. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, before we get started talking about your book, as is tradition, we always ask our guests to give a little bit of background on who they are. So first question for you is, what makes Eugene? What makes you, you?
Well, I've worked in the field of addiction and alcoholism for more than 30 years. I have watched, I grew up in New York City, where the problem of addiction, alcoholism was quite prevalent. And I had to watch that, and I've watched it destroy families in my community, as well as watch how it impacted the individual. More importantly, I also understood that this was a disease, and many times, many individuals that I've worked with in the past, their biggest fear was that they would never change.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that life presented the opportunity and you were able to share your thoughts and ideals with the rest of the world?
Yes, partially. It was not only what I always wanted to do and I plan to continue to do, but it was also a definite need. That my book is actually the first book that is written directly to the person who suffers from the disease of addiction or alcoholism. It is not, it is family members, clinicians. The book can be support information, but it is designed and it is directed to the person who themselves are in the process of recovery. So this is a select population, a targeted population, and there was nothing else out to that population at that time.
So did you have a particular inspiration? Was there a particular moment in your reckoning that said, today is the day that I need to make sure that this happens?
Well, quite honestly, I did, this was a project that had kind of festered in my heart and in my mind for many years before I actually put it pen to paper. And then it took about 3 years to figure out the dynamics that would be ideal for the person returning from or engaging in the recovery process after a period of alcoholism or addiction. So this is something that I saw the need for, worked on for quite some time, and not only that, I also thought that it was timely given the opiate epidemic.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the proper way to utilize your book, for anyone who picks up a copy, do you suggest that they read it simply cover to cover, page after page? Should they read it chapter by chapter, or perhaps more like a devotional where you read a few pages, set it down, really kind of digest what you just read, and then move on? What's your suggestion there?
My suggestion is that person would read just a portion at a time, but carry the book with them. The purpose of it, that book, is a tool for day-to-day living. I would hope that the person refers to this book and actually engages and practices some of the new behaviors that are outlined in the book, and engages in some of the practices that are outlined in the book that would help them sustain, maintain their recovery process and reach their fullest potential as a person. So I would recommend they read the book in bits and pieces and then keep the book as a point of reference.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And carry.
Now, when you were When you were putting the book together, everyone has to determine what the title of their work is going to be. How did you come about the title for your book?
That part was easy because I was very clear who were the target audience, who were the primary target audience. While I would hope that clinicians as well as laymen, as well as family members who have a family member who see the need to give this kind of book to someone they see struggling to do the right thing, to live a certain way and reclaim their lives. But the book itself was written to the recovering person as the primary target audience.
Now, many times when we talk about addiction and or alcoholism, people are sharing because there's been that personal experience. Either they themselves have gone through it, or someone in their family has gone through it. Not just because they have a passion for helping. There are many first responders or people that work in the medical field that have similar stories as well. You know, there was a tragic accident and someone saved my grandmother, so I became a nurse. You know, that type of story. It sounds as though you're speaking from a particular point of view. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. Not only did I watch my community destroyed by drugs and alcohol, that I would later learn much of which, my community was destroyed, but I watched it tear my community apart. I also watched the impact it had on my family, and then I also myself have had my experiences, and I had to actually deal with the wreckage of that kind of past, and pulling my own life back together, I was able to learn what was involved, and most of all, the new life that one can live recovery is like a rebirth of sorts. So yes, I've been impacted.
How has your life been since you have stepped into your new phase of living?
Well, that depends on quite honestly, a big portion of recovery has to do with spirituality, just how one perceives their both situations and their environment, and then how what one allows themselves to, from that perception, how they now act based on what are their feelings and emotions and the behaviors that would follow that perception. So what it does and what it has done for me has broadened my own view. Recovery is like an ongoing new birth. So as one changes their own world, as one changes, their world changes, their choices change, and many of the obstacles that they faced are no longer there. In terms of benefits, that new life that one searches for in their efforts to gain recovery happens on a day-by-day basis, but most of all, it happens on an ongoing basis. It happens in many areas, in interpersonal relationships. It happens in your career aspirations. It just happens as you change. Your world changes, your choices change, and this is all as you regain control of your life as a part of the recovery process. But that, for many people, that process is ongoing for the duration of their lives, depending on which particular treatment model you ascribe to. That particular book has a little bit of it all. So it's not aligned to any particular thought, any particular treatment model. It's in line with the basic practical steps one needs to engage on a daily basis to keep their experience vivid in their minds.
Now, many of the guests that I've had the opportunity to talk to, they have a particular moment when they realize that life has changed for them, be it that they're dealing with addiction to drugs or alcohol, or if it's addiction to a situation or a person or a thing. Some people are very much addicted to their story, and they are the eternal victim, so on and so forth. When did you realize that you were dealing with addiction personally, and that I need to step away from this? When did you have your epiphany moment?
Well, that's an ongoing process. That particular moment probably happened at about year 5 or year somewhere in that ballpark for me, in that I began to realize that while my life was taken off, others continued to suffer from the disease of addiction or alcoholism. And I also began to realize that the best way to do what I do and to keep what I have was to share it. So I began to research and I began to look at what people actually came out of these treatment facilities with, and I began to make an effort. I felt writing this book was the best effort I could make to plug that hole of having something concrete in their hand that they could refer to on a day-to-day basis.
Now, for the person who says, I'm trying to be a really great support team member for my loved one or friend who is going through this, but I'm a little bit conflicted. So people will hear, read, understand from social media and from others that, you should speak this thing, this way of being, your mindset into existence. You say that I am healed, I am thriving, I am amazing. But then they may hear that someone is saying, well, when I go to the meetings, it says, I'm an alcoholic, or I was on heroin, or whatever it is. And they don't understand why the statement has to be made as though they are still in it, as opposed to being out of it. Can you help? And I only ask that because I understand that you have your bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm not asking you, as a layperson.
And I have a master's in social work.
With that being said, why is it important for the support person to understand that each program is set up the way that it's set up?
First, the support person is depends on who that support person is. There are many different models of recovery. If that support person believes in the disease model, for example, they may believe you're going to have this disease for the rest of your life, and this is kind of supported by self-help groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, depending on the approach. And then there's a model, a psychological model, for example. That's the medical model. Then there's a psychological model, for example. And you have other kinds of support, self-help situations, such as smart recovery, that would probably be supportive of that. The tell oneself, I am an act, to make these affirmations, positive affirmations is good. But in recovery, those affirmations have to speak to, rather than I am good, I am great, those affirmations, or we would call them slogans, they have to fit a certain pattern of life, such as, for example, it's not my situation, it's how I cope. For example, the lesson I don't practice is the lesson I didn't learn. Keep it simple. Certain kinds of slogans that are specific to overcoming and confronting cues and triggers that makes one vulnerable to pick up. And this, of course, is with the help, you mentioned support, of a healthy support network that one can first be willing to actually use instead of retreating, not sharing it, not using it. So there are methods, different schools of thought on recovery, and those different schools of thought would have the suffering person say certain things. Some positive affirmations, in other situations, slogans. And then there are other types of treatment models. For example, the moral model, which speaks to morality, right, wrong, and a relationship with God. And we see that we've seen that in, for example, the Muslims successful among that group, and there's no mention of addiction at all. So the focus is improving the relationship with God. So a lot depends on which model you
do. Right, absolutely. I hate to break you off there, but it is time for us to go to break. So before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of my book is Addiction, Alcoholism, Tools for Recovery, and it can be purchased on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. I can be reached at Eugene Borwn 539 at yahoo.com.
All righty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester, but my guest today is Eugene Borwn, and I'm really excited to be talking to him about his book. So, Eugene, the next question that I have for you is, as far as recovery is concerned, I think that many people try to compare injury as they do issue to other injuries and issues. So with that being said, how should someone count, or when do they consider someone to be fully recovered? And I say that with air quotes. As a cancer survivor, I know that many times people will say, well, my cancer is in remission, while others are able to say that they are cancer-free. That's what I mean by people make the comparison between one issue or injury and another. When can someone who's dealing with alcoholism or addiction, when are they able to say that they are fully recovered, or is that a misunderstanding?
Well, that depends on, again, which model you ascribe to. For example, the disease model says you can never be fully recovered. You can only manage the symptoms of your disease. In the context of that model, there's no real agreement in the field as to how long a person should stay in treatment. So what might be one person can be in treatment for a month and another one may need a much more higher level of care. And there's no guarantee that the one who stayed for a month versus the one who stayed for 18 months will be any better off. There's just addiction is a very individual experience. More often than not, it's couched in early childhood trauma, other kinds of experiences that might upset a person's balance, and or complex trauma, this series of events that just happen in one's life, and the person never gets a chance to process or heal from event A before event B happens. How long will a person be in recovery? Rarely will you hear, if ever, a person say you're completely cured, depending on their training. If they're trained under the disease model. If they're trained in other models, though, for example, the moral model, they don't necessarily think once an addict, always an addict. In the social model, they definitely don't believe, the social model holds, for example, if you put someone in an area that there are no drugs, they may never touch drugs again. So that model may ascribe to the idea that now that you're no longer around drugs, you no longer have the problem. So it depends on the model which one ascribes to, and that's all very individual, because undergirding a recovery is a relationship between mental health and your recovery, as well as your physical health. in your recovery. Both of those areas, your medical, your physical health, and your mental health, can be cues or triggers to relapse. So a lot depends on many, many variables. It's really, really hard to say. And as I said, in terms of reaching that pinnacle of, okay, you're recovered, recovery is a lifestyle. You're no longer afraid of drugs. You're making a conscious decision not to go that way, not to use them. That's very different from let me duck and avoid this block or that block because I'm afraid I will be tempted. At some point, you make a decision which becomes a choice based on other things going on in your life that support that choice of drugs not being a part of your life. Mm-hmm. But it's never a day that you can wake up and, like a cold, I often tell many of my patients, like a cold, if you subject yourself to the same conditions, you will get the same. Right. You will get the same response. And Absolutely. The disease model is very clear that this is a disease built with relapse and recovery as a part of it. Bursts of relapse, long periods of various experiences, but relapsing, not necessarily in drugs, but sometimes in other areas, what we might call process addictions, food, prostitution, which becomes gateways to the drug of choice. So there's a lot involved in this whole idea of addiction and recovery.
Now, when it comes
that makes it very individual.
When it comes to your message that you send out to the youth, I know that everyone wants to give really great advice to the next generation. And when it comes to the so-called war on drugs, the youth is always a part of that. How do you address the youth in your book?
Well, quite honestly, there is no distinction per se between what a young recovering person, adolescent recovering person, would be doing versus an adult recovering person, except with an adolescent, there would have to be, of course, many more supports built in, meaning much more structure, more access to professional help. Versus an adult, they can use outpatient, they could then use, or they could not be a part of an outpatient facility and just do self-help. So the book itself doesn't make a distinction because the same process of learning to effectively cope with people, situations, and address negative states, negative emotional states, negative physical states, and deal with them, cope with them in a healthy manner. These become the pivotal issues, regardless of whether this is an adult versus an adolescent. Probably an adolescent, it can be harder because of their age. Mm-hmm. But I've worked with both extensively, and I can tell you, in my own experience, there's very little difference in terms of what needs to happen for them to engage the recovery process.
Mm-hmm. Have they found that there are more success rates with youth recovery than with adult recovery, simply because they were able to catch it earlier, let's say, as opposed to a 16-year-old who starts using drugs while in high school, and they're able to be in a particular stage of recovery by the time they graduate from college, as opposed to someone who perhaps started in college and now they're in their 50s and they are starting their recovery process. Does the number of years have anything to do with your recovery, or when you started versus when you stopped? Again, using that kind of high school, starting and stopping young versus starting young and stopping with over 15, 20 years of addiction under your belt, so to speak. Does that make a difference in your recovery and how long you're able to stay sober?
No, actually, much of the research suggests two things. One, very clearly that much of the success does not depend on a particular style of a particular therapeutic method, Much of the success depends on their relationship with the therapist and their support group. Most of the change in addiction happens in groups, and lasting change often is predicated on the relationship, based on all the research, with that the person has with their clinician. Beyond that, as I said, addiction is very individual, and if a person, there is probably an agreement supported by the research that the earlier you start using, the more intense and more chronic your addiction will be at the point of its arrest. But even with that, addiction actually impacts the entire person. So unless the person is addressing underlying mental symptoms of underlying mental illness, unless they're addressing childhood trauma, maybe complex trauma, and in some cases, unless they're addressing, the physical, how they're perceiving their own physical state of affairs, because there is a medical and mental health. Unless they're addressing these things, they really may not be fully engaging or fully enjoying recovery, because it's like only treating a portion of the person, and the person has to be treated holistically.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, speaking of holistic, I want to ask, along your journey of recovery, how would you say that your faith has played a part in that? Last question for you.
Oh, well, my faith is everything. I happen to personally come from a very religious family. My dad was a minister, and my mom was pioneering gospel music. So the last person that should have ever had an experience as mine has been would be a preacher's kid. But that doesn't change the kind of impact the environment I lived in had on me. That doesn't change the impact other parts of my life had on my development. As I said, addiction is very individual. The nature of your addiction can have a range of sources, and help has to come, and one has to be willing, but more importantly, one has to be open to take action, to make changes, to do something, because if you don't do nothing, it just stay the same. So a level of honesty, openness, and willingness to learn that this particular disease, and that would relate to all addictions, especially things like gambling, sex addiction, is known for three things: being baffling, cunning, and insidious. So that combination in and of itself makes the person the disease makes, in essence, the person their worst enemy. So that person has to learn how to love themselves, be their own friend, and be willing to identify something, reflect on their day, do a lot of other things that keeps them in recovery. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how many years they've been in. If they don't address that underlying stuff, it's just going to keep resurfacing, and they're going to keep relapsing.
Absolutely. Well, Eugene Borwn, thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Before I let you go, can you remind everyone one last time, please, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes, the title of my book is Addiction, Alcoholism, Tools for Recovery. It is available on Amazon and other sources of books, other places where books can be purchased. I can be reached personally at Eugene Borwn 539@yahoo.com. And I am eternally grateful that you allowed me this opportunity.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for being a guest as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive your grace and your mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Hello, everyone. everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about this Christian self-help book. My guest today is Angela Borwn, and we are talking about her book, 7 Deadly Sins That Poison the Soul and How to Conquer Them. Now, with that being said, you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Angela. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Hello, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I cannot wait to talk to you about your book, but as is tradition around here, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to our listening audience. So with that being said, Angela, my first question for you is, what makes you, you?
Well, hello, Dr. Chester. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. What makes Angela Borwn is that I am a believer in the body of Christ. I love the Lord. I am also a native from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I graduated from Morgan State University. I have a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's of science degree in logistics management. And so to date, I have produced a short film entitled The Love You Save. I have written 2 virtual plays. They were shown on Zoom. One was shown last July called The Wedding Prep, and then Pruning Ivy was also shown in January and in June, and they were both produced by Moxie and Common Ground Theaters. And so I believe that not only has God given me the wisdom and a fortitude to write books, but also plays and movies as well. So that is my ministry, and that's what makes Angela, Angela.
Absolutely. Let's give a hoo-ha for women in media. Absolutely. Making it happen for the kingdom. I love it. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that life simply presented the opportunity, and that's just another way that you're able to share your message?
Absolutely. I've always wanted to be a writer, actually, is what I really wanted to do, but God is so faithful and so good. It just so happened that I was able to write a book at this season in my life. I was going to start my writing career once I retired from corporate America, but I think God had other plans for me, and so here I am.
Now, if I have it noted here correctly, you have chosen to author the book, we can find it as A.D. Borwn, when we're looking for the book 7 Deadly Sins That Poison the Soul and How to Conquer Them. So I don't want to confuse anyone out there. If you don't find it under Angela Borwn, it is A as in Angela, D Borwn. So thank you so much for making sure to put that down. I know that can make a world of difference. Now, the title of your book, many times I know that authors will say, Dr. Angela, the title just came to me one night, like out of the blue. Others will say many times it's from the writings itself, that a sentence or a paragraph really kind of spoke to them, and that's how they came about the title. How did you come about the title for your book?
I actually came up with the title based off of the many conversations that I had with people, whether it was family members, friends, colleagues, church family, sorority sisters. What I felt was there was a commonality with these conversations. And so the subject matter that we were talking about fell under one of the categories outlined in my book, which is jealousy, unforgiveness, anger, pride, disobedience, gossip, and addiction. So that's how I came up with the title.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's that. Now, as far as your ideal reader is concerned, I know that for several authors, they're writing for a particular group. Perhaps it's teens, or it's young adults, or it's for caregivers. You know, you're able to put a category, if you will, for who the ideal reader is. Did you write the book in a way that it would include like our teens, like perhaps someone as young as high school, or would you say maybe a little older than college age, maybe a little more appropriate? What's the ideal age range there?
I really tried my best to be inclusive, so I wanted to really get as many people in the younger generation. So I would say at least a sophomore in high school, because I try to write it with such simplicity. I try to write it as a girlfriend speaking with you over the phone, encouraging you and edifying you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that idea, and thank you for saying that, because I think for so many of the authors that I interview, it is more of an adult book. You know, it's like older than college age, and I know that there are still some high schoolers out there that like to read, even though everything is very visual. You know, and it's 15 seconds and 30-second videos, but there's still some folks out there that like to read. So thank you for being mindful of them as well. Now, as far as where you are in your faith and reading the book, I know that some folks just got saved yesterday. You know, they just found the Lord yesterday. So they don't know as much as perhaps someone who has grown up in the church, or they've been a Christian for half of their lives. Would it be okay for someone who is still a babe in the faith to read the book, or would you say that you need kind of some Christian years under your belt?
Oh, absolutely. It is definitely for the new believer as well, because what I'm doing is I'm sharing life experiences. So you don't have to have any type of Christian background to understand life, the things that we all go through. So I'm sharing all of my experiences, my heartbreak, my heartache, my triumphs, and I'm showing and telling everyone how God has given me the ability to overcome. And so anyone at any stage or any walk of life, this book is for you, because it's telling you and showing you characteristics of God. So it's reaffirming his goodness. It's reaffirming everything that we've learned about him, that he's a loving father. So yes, it's definitely for new believers as well as seasoned believers. So certain things will serve as reminders to remind you how faithful he is, to remind you how to work his word, because his word does work when you apply it to any situation.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked that question. And I love that answer, because I think that for so many people who they're mature in their faith, many times they forget, or they misremember, or they've taken for granted some of the things that cause that fire to burn in you when you're a new believer, you know. So I'm glad that you have some kindling in there for them to reignite that fire. I love that. I love that. Now, speaking of fire, was there any particular thing that really motivated you to get the book out? Not necessarily to write the story, but something that said, you know what, you need to get this book out right now, and you need to do it right now. Like, here is the time.
Yes, absolutely. One of the key components was I wanted to help others, because I remember checking all the Christian boxes. I remember, and I still do, go to church, go to Wednesday night Bible study, paying my tithes, giving my offerings. I remember serving in the ministry, and also reading my Bible, doing praise and worship on my own without being in the church. And I felt like I was still struggling. I was still stuck. I was hurt. And when I tried to reach out to people who I felt like had the credentials to help me, what I heard was, now what's wrong with you? Or what's wrong with you now? And I remember those words devastating me and penetrating my heart and hurting me. And so I prayed and said, Lord, I never want to do that to anyone. I never want to make anyone feel bad because they need help. And so as I was writing this book, I was contemplating, because I initially wrote this book, to leave a legacy for my family members. That's why I initially wrote it, for the legacy piece of it. And God was like, why limit yourself doing that? Why bless your poor and no more? Make it available to anyone and everyone that needs help. And when I thought about how I was stuck for so many years and how I had to fight and claw and keep pressing into the Lord to overcome the challenges that I was faced with. I decided, you know what, I must write something and get it out so anyone who's hurting, anyone who feels like I can't do this another day, you know, I got more on me than what I can bear. I'm doing all of that, I know to do. I'm checking all the boxes and I'm still hurting. This book is for you. And this is why I felt that it was necessary for me to write it and talk about the most common challenges that, you know, we were facing, my friends and family members and so forth. And so, yeah.
And I'm so glad that you listened. You know, for so many folks, they are disobedient to a certain degree, right? They will, okay, Lord, well, I wrote the book, you know, it's out there, fine. You know, like they do it begrudgingly, not understanding that someone needs this information. Someone needs your book, that it is, like you say, it's not just about your 4 and no more, but it is about the more that need to hear your voice as well. So glad that you listened to that prompting and that you shared with the masses. It is definitely making a difference out there. Now, if there is one thing in particular that you want for a reader to take away from the book, I know that for many authors, they will say, well, I had an overarching theme, you know, that I wanted to make sure that people knew that it was about grace or hope or love or whatever it is, right? Did you have a particular message that you feel that you really placed in the book, that if folks don't get anything else, you hope that they get this one message?
Yes, and that would be to trust God. Have hope and trust God. I know that sometimes we're faced with circumstances, just like this whole year, for example, just unpredictable. We did not see COVID coming. We didn't see all of this social unrest coming. You know, a lot of loved ones have died. I mean, just was so taxing on us mentally, physically, emotionally, financially. People lost their jobs in their homes. So it was so much coming at us. And it feels like, you know, we're overwhelmed. We've taken on more than we can bear. But it's like at the end of the day, I'm pointing you back to the cross. I'm encouraging you to trust the Lord. He will get us through. He is faithful. He's such a good God. He loves us. He's El Shaddai, our God, who is more than enough. He's all we need is Him. So I'm just pointing people back to the cross, and I'm saying, make the decision to live again, because I remember when I was so down and out and distraught, I remember begging God to take my life. And so I'm giving people hopefully hope and to trust the Lord and say, make the decision to live. Make a decision to get up and do it one more day. Make a decision to say, I can do it. I can trust the Lord. He's our strength. He's our redeemer. He's our restorer. He's everything that we need Him to be. He's Elohim. He's the most high God. So trust the Lord. That's the overarching factor. I'm sharing my experiences to say, you know, He's not a respecter of persons. If He can do it for me, He can definitely do it for you. He can help you overcome in any area. Get in His word, work the word, stay steadfast, remain connected to Him. You'll have victory.
Amen to that. Oh my goodness. I know that there is someone right now nodding their head. They have thrown that hand up in the air. They are saying, amen, sister, amen. It is so true. Well, let me tell you, it is so true. You know, I think we forget sometimes that it is okay to take our life day by day, be it that we're going through something or not, you know, that we can do it day by day. I know that with so many of the other things that we do and how we express ourselves on social media, many times we're challenging folks to, you know, plan your life out. What's your 10-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? You know, what are you going to do for the next 6 months? Granted, I teach folks how to do that, but you just really hit the nail on the head there, and that is, it's okay to do the day by day and wake up and say, Lord, I hope you got me, because I need a little help today. You are so right. You are so right. As a breast cancer survivor, and listeners, you guys know I've shared this story, that prior to my having breast cancer, Angela, I admit I did not say good morning to God every single solitary day. I did not. After breast cancer, before my feet hit the floor, I say literally good morning, God, thank you for waking me up. And then I allow my consciousness to do whatever, my brain's going to do. But I tell you, you have really, really, really shifted the paradigm for someone today. You have really caused them to pause for just a moment and go, I like that. I like that. So thank you. Thank you for that answer. Well, it is time for us to go to break. And what a great place, right? Give you guys more time to ponder what she just said. I love it. Angela, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Absolutely. My book is called 7 Deadly Sins That Poison the Soul and How to Conquer Them. And it's by my pen name, A.D. as in David, Brown. You can purchase this book on Amazon.com or Exebrius.com, which is XLIBRIS.com. And you can keep in contact with me at Angela at adbrownproductions.com. And you can also go to AD Brown Productions on Facebook. Thank you.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. My guest today has an amazing name. Her name is Angela. Her name is Angela Borwn. You can find her as A.D. Brown. It's her pen name for her book, 7 Deadly Sins That Poison the Soul and How to Conquer Them. I love the title of this book. Now, Angela, I had to give a hoo-ha out to your parents for naming you Angela, because that's an amazing name. So, and there's not a whole lot of us in the world, but there are enough of us, but not a whole lot of us. So thank you again for being on the show. Now, for someone who says, I like what you're talking about. I think your book is really, sounds like it might be something that I need to pick up a copy of. So my next question for you is for that person that says, I don't know, I need a little bit more. So what's in it for me? If I get a copy of the book, having read the book, Angela, what am I going to get out of it? So that's my question for you, for the person who's not quite convinced.
Well, I share personal experiences dealing with the 7 deadly sins. Again, that's jealousy, unforgiveness, anger, pride, disobedience, gossip, and addiction. So if you're having any challenges in any of those areas, or if you know someone who is, this is a great resource as to, I talk about the sin in itself. I provide scriptures of how the sin was portrayed in the Bible. Then I share my personal experience of what I've gone through in this particular challenge. And then I have prayer. So oftentimes when I meet people and when I tell them that they need to take this to the Lord in prayer, they say to me, I don't even know how to pray. I don't know where to begin. So I offer a format of prayer of what you can say, how you can communicate to the Lord until you feel comfortable enough to replace my words with your own words and pour out your heart to the Lord in reference to these challenges that you're trying to overcome. And then I also offer somewhere where you can journal, where you can, get that root up out of you. So we want to pull that root up out of us so that we can move forward and be the person that God has called us to be.
Oh, I like that. I especially like that you included a prayer and how you said that. You can use my words until you're able to use your own. I really, really like that. I know that that's something that many times people will express a concern over. When we're in those settings and the moderator or the leader will ask someone to pray impromptu. And when you get to that part of the program, it's like, well, it's time for prayer. And folks are like, ooh, I hope she doesn't ask me. I mean, I'm not like that. But I know that folks are, like that. Please don't call on me to pray because they haven't practiced enough in their alone time. And one of the complaints is, I just don't know what to say. So yes, I love that you have done that. That takes some of the worry away for that person that's concerned about what to say. very, very smart. Now, I want to kind of stay along that same vein. That person who says, we have naysayers in the world, right? That person who, that doubting Thomas, if you will, that always needs a little bit of extra proof, or they need one more exhibit for you to prove your point. With that being said, how do you address the person who says, well, how do you know that the solutions are going to work? Like, how can I trust or believe that what you're telling me is actually going to benefit me?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I love that question. Again, the word works when you work the word. When you apply God's word to any situation, you remain steadfast and focused on that word, the word will work. God is not obligated to our tears. He's not obligated to our nervous breakdowns, our frustration, our anger, our rage. He's not obligated to any of that. But God is obligated to his word. And I am providing scriptures in my book that you can read from the Bible over these situations so that you can get a solid word that you can pray over your situation. And I just want to give you a brief example. My daughter was diagnosed with having asthma when she was 3 years old. And I just made a pact to the Lord that I'm not dealing with this. I don't want my baby to not be able to play sports because I'm a nervous wreck if she's running too hard and she may have an asthma attack. So what I did was pull out scriptures on healing. And so every time I had to give my baby that albuterol, what I did was say, Jesus was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of his peace is upon you. And by his stripes, you are healed. And so I kept saying those confessions over my daughter, along with other healing scriptures. And then when she turned 5 years old and I took her to the doctors, they said, ma'am, what kind of medications are you giving to her? And I said, albuterol, because she has asthma. She said, ma'am, your daughter does not have asthma. Please stop giving her albuterol. So my point to anyone who's doubting, I would suggest that you read the book for yourself, apply the solutions that I provide in the book, because I'm showing you what I did. And so you can go ahead and just start there, looking at what I did to get my results. Look what I did to seek God's face, and you can try the same things that I did and see if God does not honor his word. He said, put him to the test. Don't put me to the test. Put God to the test and see if he's a man that he cannot lie. So he's obligated to his word.
I am so glad that you shared that story, and thank you for that, because I know that there's someone else saying, you know what? That is so true. That's right. That did happen. Like they have their own personal stories that they can share about how prayer has worked. And I don't think that people, for so many folks, they think that as Christians, we're just saying that, like that's one of our pre-approved taglines, like it's in the handbook kind of thing. Christians always say that. Why? Because it's true. And when we do pray the word over that person, it makes such a difference, because God likes to hear his word told back to him. So you are so right there. I love it. Now, I have to ask that as an author, I know that many times when you are putting the book together in the format that you want to present to us, sometimes it can also, ignite a fire in you. It can cause you to remember or become reignited and have a new fire for God and in your faith. Would you say that in putting the book together and presenting it to the world, that it had a positive effect on you as well while you were sharing with us?
Oh, absolutely. It truly did. It taught me the value of being transparent. Oftentimes we're told that, no, don't put the family's business out in the street. Everybody doesn't need to know that. And we have some people that's vowing to take secrets to their grave. And I believe that stuff is killing us. I believe it's indirectly killing us. We're so busy trying to hide from the past, run from it, duck from it. We're trying to stuff it. We're trying to act like it doesn't exist. And I think all of that's contributing to high blood pressure and diabetes. We're doing all this stuff that we weren't built to do. And so for me, it was more or less about stepping out of my comfort zone, being a private person that I am, and start thinking about somebody else. Because there's somebody else that's going through what I've already gone through. And it was more important for me to be that beacon of light, that ray of hope to help them, to pull them from the fire.
Absolutely. I think you're really right. I love it. I love it. Now, one of the questions that I meant to ask you a little bit earlier, and that is how to properly read your book. I know that for so many authors, they will present it in a way that we should consume it cover to cover, literally meaning, page after page after page. Others have presented it in a way where it's more so read this chapter, put it down, allow that to kind of marinate in your spirit, and then take it from there. Others present almost like a devotional where you read a few pages and then put it down. How did you present your book? What's the proper way to read your book?
I would say one of two ways. You can either read one chapter and then there's a section in there for you to reflect. So I want you to think about everything you just read, whether you're reading the information that I provided from the Bible, the stories that are in the Bible, against where I share my personal story, and then also related to how, you may have struggles and challenges in the areas. What areas can you improve? What takeaways can you get from that chapter? And then I want you to reflect and journal, because now that you have the knowledge, it's reinforced when you write it out, is what I say. Mm-hmm. And so you're just taking ownership of, here are the changes that I can make. Here's what I can do. I mean, I can't do everything, but this is what I can do, and trust the Lord to do the rest. So you can either read it by, the first chapter, or you can just read it in segments. You can read about the stories in the Bible and reflect on that, and then reflect on, once I start sharing my personal challenges in that area. And then you can also, reflect when you think about what you're going through. Mm-hmm. So the key is to make sure that you're improving, that you're getting better, that you have a takeaway, that you learn something that you can put in place, you can put in practice, that you can change so that you can grow in that area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like that you've put those pauses in there. It's like do the stuff at the end. Don't skip that, but do the stuff at the end. Such a well put together book. I love that. Thank you so much for being mindful about that. Now, I know that for so many of my authors, the world is opening up again. Yay. And new things are on the horizon, right? We can't wait to get back to doing book expos and book signings and being out there and about, and especially the fact that you do plays and all of that, and being able to have people in those seats at the theaters and all of that. With that being said, are there any upcoming projects that you are working on, be it that they're still, from a virtual perspective, or perhaps you have some things that you can't wait to really release and have in-person events about? Is there anything on the horizon for you right now?
Yes, I am currently wrapping up my feature film, or wrapping up the writing process of it. So we're about to go into pre-production. So I'm so excited about it. And that is what I am working on. And hopefully we will start full production in the beginning of next year. So that is where I'm at.
We are out of time. Before I let you go, Angela, if you could, can you remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Absolutely. The title of my book is 7 Deadly Sins That Poison the Soul and How to Conquer Them. And you can get the book at Amazon.com or Xebrius.com. And you can keep in contact with me on Facebook and online at adbrownproductions.com.
I love it. Thank you again, Angela, for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
You are so welcome. It was truly my pleasure. Thanks again.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. We realize that you could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend this time with us, and I truly appreciate your doing so. With that being said, I leave you with this. May the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.